the site's got a slight slope. We've gone from earthworks to slab to frames up, roof trusses, and now we have a roof. If you're building in Wellington, there's a high chance you're going to be building on a slope. Hey, I'm Josh, a builder here in New Zealand. In this video here, we'll take a deep dive into some of the sloping sites I've worked on in the Wellington area. Not only did I build my own house on a gnarly sloping site, but I've tackled a number of sites for my clients. Stick around to the end, I'll tell you my tips and tricks for tackling sloping sites in Wellington. Literally my home on this section nobody wanted had been on the market for 15 years. So many people looked at it, no one thought they could build on it. Bit by bit, we found a design, we worked out how to do it. It's now got what I believe is a beautiful home. It's a great place to live. I love the trees, I love the outlook. There's no two ways about it. Everything you do on a sloping site is harder than if it's on the flat. Walking your materials from A to B, doing your measurements, setting out. Man, it is the hardest set out I have done. The profile over in this corner is 3.3 meters out of the ground. Everything you're doing is like, hey, pass me this, grab that. It's definitely a trickier job. Day one of a brand new job. You know, at first thoughts, it was hard to see where a house would fit. It was a sloping site, it had dogleg driveway access, it was overgrown, it was hard to see that we could fit a house there. So different sites require different work, and this one is unique. Over there we have had to install a 1.4 meter retaining wall, and on this side of the front face we have a 1.4 meter block wall. We've got code of compliance inspection on Monday and handover at the end of next week. The section's a triangle on a slope, and we've been working with the owners now for about 2 years. You don't want to do like gnarly earthworks unnecessarily, but you also want to push into that bank a little bit. You want to use the space under your house, then you build up on top of that. You're just trying to create level platforms. So look at your angle, what's the best way? Do you get the level platform in here, or do you get the level platform in here? The owners were worried that they had bitten off more than they could chew. Can we even build a house here? Is it possible? Not only did we think it was possible, but we helped them create a vision for a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom family home that is now finished. See how the street slopes, so that house will be above it, that house will be below it. As the site dips away, we're going to have to build it up, so half of the house will be on a concrete slab, and then we hang a subfloor off that. This section would have been a dud section, and now that we've cut it and we've leveled it, it's amazing. On our lower hut rear lot, we can't even drive onto the building platform. We've got to get all our materials craned up or walked up, and then we've got to walk up 3 flights of scaffold to get to the top layer. Now that takes time and that takes energy. You're building in the back corner over there, you go up, you take a measurement, you work it out, you come down to your cut zone, you cut, you then take it back up, check it, put it up. Now, what if you then need to make an adjustment? What if you're doing something like cutting around a window flashing where it requires multiple cuts and multiple measurements? We encourage our builders that if it's not right, you do it again, but that requires walking up and down the scaffold multiple times during the day. That means that your sloping site is going to take sometimes twice as long as what we could do on the flat. It's a wet Monday morning here on site. I'm out here slaving away. Yeah, we can deal with the weather and rain and puddles on a flat site, but as soon as you've got that slope, it just gets harder. It just becomes like a mudslide. It becomes like a slip and slide show. You just spend so much more energy and time getting from A to B constantly. I'm not saying it's not rewarding. I'm not saying it's not worth it. Buying a sloping site can appear like a bargain. It's a cheaper price and it can overall end up just as good, if not better, than a normal new build. But you've got to factor in those extra costs early on. You've got to know that you're going to be spending minimum 50 to 100K more than that flat, central, new, easy build. Yeah, it's good to be aware of this stuff. If you have a sloping site, don't expect the square meter rate to be the same as a flat site. And it's really hard to give you that comparison. It's important to know, even building a 2-story build going up, say we're doing 200 square meters going up, that is more expensive than building 200 square meters on the flat going out. Everything at that second layer costs more. I would say it adds anywhere between 10 and 20% to a build. And then you've got to add the slope factor. Again, it could add another 10% minimum base cost to a normal build just to get your retaining walls in, get your site cuts and get established. Building on slopes is a reality. Like, a large majority of my jobs have been on sites like that, and there have been retaining walls, or there have been like major earthworks. There have been lots and lots of time spent in the ground digging footings and doing block walls and doing lots and lots of steel and engineering before you get into the real carpentry stuff. So you got your slope, and whether you're doing cut, where you create benches and you cut into the hill, or whether you're doing retaining walls where you fill flat areas, either way is going to require earthworks, it's going to require time, it's going to require materials, it's most likely going to require engineers' design. Again, it doesn't mean we can't do them and that we shouldn't do them, it's just you've got to factor them into your process. I've tackled a few sloping sites now, and I've got a couple of tips about how you can minimize the impact that those sites have, or how you can make the most of your sloping site. Tip number one, you got to get a good designer on board, and that good designer needs a good survey. You need a good topographical survey that shows you the exact lay of the land. Now, one of the ways that you're going to get a really good survey is you're going to make sure that the majority of your build platform and your access is free from vegetation. There's been a bit of action on site this week. Over the weekend we've been doing some tree work. That's so that when they come along with their GPS surveyor, they can actually get accurate results.
That's the point I put in just now. That's the front face there, so it's 2 meters off that. This one measures the vertical and horizontal angles.
And then that topographical survey will give us the lay of the land. That gets put in the designer's computer, and then the designer will load up the lay of the land and the house, and we can start to work together to move things around and manipulate the design. And that leads into tip number 2, which is to work with the land. By that I mean you want to look at, like, if this is how your land's going, there'll be a natural way to do a cut and a wall and a fill, and each site's different depending on where the view is, where the access is, but that's where you work with your designer. You do the design, you get input from the builder, you get input from the engineer, you get input, then you revise, and that leads into tip number 3, which is to keep everybody in the loop, from the builder, the designer, the council. At the end of the day, it's your sloping site and it's your vision and it's your home, and that team of people, even including the council, need to be on board to achieve your vision. And so it's your job to be the go-between the builder and the designer. You want to make sure your team is up to date with what's happening. I think when I did the section nobody wanted, I talked to the council, I talked to the engineer, I talked to building mates, and we came up with something in the end that we believed was the best balancing act of all those scenarios. Everyone loves a bonus tip. So number 4 is you've got to think about your process way more on a sloping site. Think about all the earthworks you want to do early on, even including landscaping, because more than likely, once you've built that house, it's going to be really hard to get that digger around the back and in that top corner later on. We've got landscape architect on site right now. What we're learning is that if you get the landscaping stuff sorted as early as possible, while you've got big diggers, while the site is clear, is the easiest time to do some of that work and actually saves you a lot of money in the end. While you've got a massive digger, while you don't have a house in the way, you can clear, you can move, you can put stuff in. It makes a massive difference. A lot of people think that landscaping and the house are two separate things done by two separate people, and they can be, but if you don't do your big cuts and your earth moving now, while there's a big machine on site, it becomes so much harder later on. You want to spend the time properly at the start to work out how the house and the land are going to interact. You want them to be one. You want to really think about the entire process and do as much as you can up front. Make your build platform as wide as possible, as clean as possible, as flat as possible. You might even want to consider putting a layer of base course down over stuff. You want to think about your zones. And then you want to kind of establish, right, this is where a bin's going to live and it's not going to be in the way of the house or not going to be in the way of deliveries. This is where deliveries are going to live. These shouldn't be last minute decisions that you make on the fly, but you should slow down. I get it, like me personally, I wanted to just rush into things. I wanted to see progress on site after thinking about it and designing it for so long. But you also want to take a little bit of time to think about those things with some good thought and a good plan that'll save you tens or hundreds of hours in the future. And that can be the difference between the project sucking all your resources dry or you enjoying the process. I remember early on I had locked in a design on the section nobody wanted, and then I found out that a tree at the back that I thought was reasonably little and okay to chop down was actually protected. And this is a protected totara. The netting around the outside is what's called a tree protection zone. So that's all about looking after the roots, and we can't work in there or even store materials. It's the tree there. It meant that I couldn't put my garage where I wanted, and we had to like essentially flip the whole design. In the end, I've come up with something that I'm happy about, but there's always going to be unknowns or changes, or when you model it up in the computer, it's not quite working the way you want. I think you've got to have a vision of what you're trying to achieve and then be flexible to move things around to make that vision come to life. Part of that, being flexible, is working out your key goals. What are your like non-negotiables, or what are you trying to achieve? Like, it must have 3 bedrooms, or I really want to capture the view of this over here. Work out those things and then make everything else fit around it. The reality is, building in the Wellington region, we're going to be building on sloping sites. So it's about learning ways to tackle that. So I hope this video hasn't discouraged you from your sloping site, but has given you a little bit more of a reality check and some facts. There is a time and a place to build on a sloping site, and if you've got one that you're considering, I would encourage you to tackle it. It could be the most rewarding thing you do.